Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, your favorite Giants podcast. We are back after the conclusion of the 2024 NFL season, the 2024 Giants season, and this is being recorded Black Monday night, but we were woken this morning by fresh news. Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen are remaining as the head coach and general manager of the New York Giants. How are you doing on this snowy Monday, Cranky Fan?
Well, Grump, I really would like to spend the first 15 minutes talking about how pathetic the Knicks were tonight and how bad they've been for the last week. But, we have bigger fish to fry, obviously. And let's talk about this. So them both coming back was something I believe we both predicted was going to happen. I think we're going to be looking, as I know me specifically, is going to be looking at this, how they got to this decision a lot differently than a lot of people are. And I'm really happy to explain my thought process. I might be a crazy person, but I'm looking at this from a whole different way that, other podcasts, the media, fans are looking at it. So just hear me out as we go through the show of why I think the way I'm thinking for this and how I don't think for the greater good and my greater concern of being a Giant fan going forward, this wasn't the worst decision in spite of how badly it looks on the surface. So lots to talk about.
So before we get into that decision, just a brief couple of points. The Giants lost their final game of the season 20-13 to the Eagles backups. The Giants were also playing mainly backups in this game. I think I counted a grand total of like 5 starters on defense playing, and I think like 5 starters on offense as well.
Yeah.
Maybe 6. I can't remember now, but it was a relatively close game. I think the Giants probably could have come back in this one. There was a lot of interesting stuff going on with rotating players throughout the whole game. You and I had a brief back and forth of texts regarding are they tanking this game, and I think that once you get into you can't tell if they're tanking a specific game. This is just my opinion. If you can't tell in a specific game if they're tanking, there is this in-between option in that you could just be, let's pretend you're not 3-14, you don't have a quarterback situation. Let's say you're 6-8, something like that. You're a bad team.
You're the Cowboys.
Yeah, okay. You're a bad team. The playoffs are out of reach. You know that. It's the last week of the season. You could sit players for injury-related reasons for the long term without it being considered tanked. You could be rotating players to see your depth in live game action as if it's a preseason game because it also doesn't matter without the game being considered tanked. These are sort of like, I don't know. I came away from this being like, if I can't tell that they intentionally threw this game, then I don't think it counts. I don't know what we kind of briefly were texting about that, but we didn't talk over the phone, so it was sort of like
yeah.
I don't know if I was very clear through text.
No. You made sense. I mean, to me, I couldn't tell because I just couldn't understand. There was no consistency at all in the pattern of how the game appeared to be coached and game planned. Like we were going for everything early, and you can hide tanking under the guise of, well, we're just being aggressive. If it's 4th and 7 deep in your territory and you're going for it, you could just say, we're just being aggressive. We're just going for it, even though, it may not be the smart move to do. And
it's tough because they've been inconsistent with that particular thing all year too.
That's part of that is why I kind of was like, are they actually taking this game or are they not? It just seems so inconsistent, and so from one series to the next, are they just, are they trying to win this game? Are they trying to get the first down, or are they just trying to put themselves in a position to optically try, but really are not trying? It was very bizarre, and it's just a weird game. That was an atmosphere. I mean, this is Giants Eagles for crying out loud, and it had all the atmosphere of a game. Week 2 preseason game. I mean, even the stands were half empty. You have quarterbacks you've never heard of playing for Philly. Just, very like, almost. I think both teams probably would have preferred a running clock in this one, to be honest.
I gotta say, I remember doing Tanner McKee draft film back in my old apartment and being like, "Oh my god, this guy stinks."
Yeah.
So it was absolutely chapping my ass watching him just carve apart
Lollipop.
just
Yeah.
carve apart the defense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's not a good quarterback, like, at all. Um,
No. No.
but
He might be starting next week.
what? No, he's not.
Hurts is still in the concussion protocol.
I think he came out today,
Oh, I know. I saw this afternoon. He was still in it.
but I still think he's behind Kenny Pickett in the depth chart, isn't he?
Didn't Kenny Pickett didn't he have like a broken rib or something?
Oh, did he? All right,
I thought
I'm
he
out
was
of the
out
news
also.
on that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a potential he might be playing.
Is Kenny Pickett even an Eagle? Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. He was a Steeler before that, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. All right.
Our next episode of Just Eagles will be showing next week.
Yeah, for real. I don't care about Malik Neighbors' accolades in this game, but what I will say is some of the outstanding plays were outstanding. That was fun to watch. I think that's all I've got on the game.
Yeah, one of the things, topics I've been brainstorming and what we're going to talk about, as we kind of segue from the season, does anything get you excited at all about this team? And Malik Neighbors is really 1A and 1B because you see the potential. I mean, if you see something where if he has a quarterback, if he has an offensive line, he has a wide receiver too that can, scare a defense. This guy can be dangerous. And the flashes that we've seen this year, I know there's been some drops, but we've seen 100+ catches. We've seen him make plays, spectacular plays. We've seen the potential to be a true wide receiver one, not just a wide receiver one, but a guy who makes something out of nothing wide receiver one. That's exciting. And, we're going to talk about it, obviously Joe Schoen and, stay or nay, but if you're going to criticize him for busts, you got to criticize him for you got to give him accolades for making this pick.
Yeah. I think that the last 2 weeks, Neighbors has really revitalized the hype in him, the belief in him, the hope for him. And, maybe he's playing against backups, but he's also surrounded by backups. The Giants have been playing backups for most of this year. Certainly the most recent portion of this year. So it's sort of a wash in my opinion. I think it's still exciting. Circling back to what we were saying about the tank thing. John Mara was asked about whether or not they were intentionally losing or anything like that, and he had said if I felt like we were intentionally losing, something along the lines like if he felt that they were intentionally losing any of the last 2 games, we'd be having like a different conversation. Basically, he would have fired them on the spot, and that's fine because that's the correct answer to that question, right? But if you're going to use that as evidence, like, see, they weren't tanking, grow up. I mean, like, the cardinal rule is you can't ever admit that you're doing it, especially from an ownership standpoint, because that's where it happens. That's kind of where the decisions lie. The owner has to sign off on a season that is intentionally not going to be good. And you can't ever say that because it ruins the brand. And no one is... There are few owners more connected to the brand than John Mara, right? I mean, you have Jerry Jones, John Mara, Rooney. Who else?
The Ford family, the McClaskey family from the Bears, House McClaskey family. I've said this since I've been born that I really don't care what people say in press conferences. I'm going to suspend that a little bit for this conversation we're going to talk about with Mara in the press conference. But there's no way on God's green earth he's ever going to admit that they were tanking. No way.
Never. Exactly.
Never. Of course not. I mean, the league, the second anybody doesn't believe that sports are on the up and up, that is the death knell of a sport. If they think there's players fixing games, people are tanking, if they believe that, you losing your integrity, it's over. And especially in a league now that relies so heavily on gambling, that for revenue streams as a way to attract for TV ratings, all of that stuff. there is zero chance, zero, that, never mind a player saying it, an owner,
Mm-hmm.
a direct stakeholder in all of this
Right.
is going to say it.
Yeah.
So sometimes there's white lies that are said, look for the wink, look for the gleam in the eye, but
So how do you want to discuss it? Do you want to discuss the justification and response from John Mara and Joe Schoen about the decision to retain them, or do you want to give your thoughts on the decision to retain them first?
well, let's start with our opinions first, because
Okay.
that's why
Sure.
people are listening. We're not
Okay.
reporters.
Fair enough.
We're opinion people. In a vacuum of just, if I look at the record, if I look at the record last year, I look at the downward trajectory, I have absolutely no problem launching either of them. I don't. I don't buy into, well, give them enough time to do this. The trajectory appears, just looking at the numbers, not what came up with the numbers. Yeah, very, very logical decision would be to launch both of them and start over. However, nothing in this world is black and white. Nothing in this world is, well, the record this year was 3-14. We made a fundamental out of the box decision to get out of the Daniel Jones business. When you get out of the Daniel Jones business, you are taking your best quarterback, the most important position of any position in sports, off your team. You are not going to be as successful as you would have been. That is an inherent tank right there. And as soon as you do that, as soon as you have buy in for everyone, I honestly, from the bottom pit of my heart, didn't care what happened the rest of this year. I didn't care what the record was. I don't care what the product in the field looked. We made the decision we are looking for towards 2025 and beyond. And the only reason I believe that decision was made is because there was buy-in from owner, coach, GM, and quarterback too. I mean, Daniel Jones got his wish; he got released, he moved on. Um, there was buy-in that we are going to do this, and it doesn't matter what the end result is going to be. You guys will all be here to move forward. So when you hear Mara talk about, well, I spoke to the coaches on Friday, thought about it on Saturday, made my decision. No, 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 no. That, my opinion is, the decision to bring them back happened the moment the decision was made. They were benching Daniel Jones and looking to next year. So what had me worried was how Mara, and maybe possibly, how Daboll handled the losing and the blowback from it and the negativity from it, and people who weren't thinking about big picture, just loss, 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 loss. And I still believe there was wavering from Mara about that. Now, I am a big process person. Process meaning, if you commit to something, you commit to it, you see it through. I am glad, on one hand, that what appears to be what was agreed upon is going to happen. We are forsaking the rest of this year. We are starting over. You guys are going to do it. Whether those are the right people to do it, I go either way with it. But looking at it from what transpired to how we got to this point, I think the right decision was made to keep them. That's not a reflection on whether I think Joe Schoen's a good GM, which my jury's out. Whether Brian Daboll is a good coach or not, I think he is. Coaching is reflective a lot on the talent you have around too. You can't turn water into wine. I say it 100,000 times. So having hope for any hope for this franchise to turn around, and having any hope that Mara is has any of his marbles left, little my confidence is a little bit restored by their staying. That could change in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. But right now, I think just continue to execute a plan they started 8 weeks ago. I feel a little better going forward.
Yeah. So I echo a lot of the same things that you do. So for starters, I could have taken or left them in
Same.
terms of their output. Right? If I'm only grading them on their output, I could take them or leave them. I have been well, let's start with
Let's
Brian
start with.
Daboll.
I was gonna
Oh,
say let's start with Joe Shane actually, because it's easier to grade him because his work isn't impacted as much by
yeah.
releasing Daniel Jones and the subsequent tank than coaching is. So let's start with Daboll.
All right, so I'm going to start with Daboll, but I'm going to agree with you that I think once you made the decision to tank, it's really shitty to not to just move on from them as well.
It,
Because I think that it's a little bit down the middle. I don't think it's entirely their fault, or wherever that they are where they are.
Grump, can I clarify one thing before you keep going? I apologize for interrupting, but
Mm.
I want to make this distinction really clear. They did not sit in a room and make this massive decision. His out of the box plan was not to tank. The decision was we no longer want to be in the Daniel Jones business. Subsequently, it leads to we will be tanking because we won't have as good of a team out there, and it's in our best interest to. But the decision wasn't to tank. It was we do no longer think that Daniel Jones is our quarterback for the long term, and it's in our best interest to minimize potential risk by not playing him anymore. That's a very subtle, nuanced thing, but there is a difference. So we may use the terms made the decision to tank, but what I really mean is they made that decision to move on from Daniel Jones, and obviously you're going to be tanking because of it. But the decision wasn't made to tank. It was we're done with Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that's sort of splitting hairs. I think I agree with you. Like, I don't think they looked at the whole roster and were like, we need to lose as many games as possible to get better. I think the specific problem at the quarterback position led them to well, let's just cut the cord now because there's an injury thing involved. And also, that means that we're going to be really, really bad. And also, that means the solution is usually to get the best possible draft pick. I see what you're saying, and I agree with you. Like, but
It's
I
nuanced.
think
It's
it's
very nuanced.
such
Yeah.
a split of a hair that I'm not even sure that it's not a decision to tank. But regardless, once you make that decision, that specific decision to effectively, one way or another, sabotage the season, you are sacrificing the immediate for the future. It's really shitty to then throw both the head coach and the GM under the bus after that point, especially since I think that they came into the season. It appears to me, actions appear to me that they didn't ever at any point get a real competitor for Daniel Jones's position like Russell Wilson, because they wanted to be absolutely sure that Daniel Jones was not the guy going forward. And because of the way the contract was structured, this was a good year to do it. That made the most sense. They couldn't get rid of him earlier because of the dead money. So it just didn't make sense to, whatever. And whether you agree with that or disagree with that, I think bringing in Russell Wilson for a minimal amount of money or guaranteeing him the week one starter spot or whatever is a small price to pay for whatever. But
Yeah, and you could say also the biggest mistake that this organization made was basically trusting and counting on Daniel Jones being 100% healthy, recovering, and being what he was basically for that playoff game
But I
in
don't think that they
Minnesota.
did. I think that this was an assurance to show themselves, John Mara, and possibly the rest of the world. I don't know if that even matters to them, but for those in the building, it was to make certain in the building Daniel Jones is not the guy of the future.
But
It's not us. It's not Daboll. It's not the offense. It's not the defense. It's not the ownership. Daniel Jones is not cut out to do what we need him to do to win.
that's even taking the tank thing, going even more into the, it's
I honestly think so.
that's really 4D chess. And I'm not saying it didn't happen, but you are really playing with fire with that by saying,
But you're able to do that when you have more assurances as a GM and a head coach.
yeah. And that's why
so let me finish this. So Brian Daboll, why I could take him or leave him. I think as a head coach, he's been erratic. I think he's been hard to gauge. He's been inconsistent. I think that he has too soft of a relationship with his players and too hard of a relationship with his coaches. These are all things I think. The most important stuff, probably, because I think Bill Parcells was probably a pain in the ass, and people maybe didn't like working with him. Like having some of those qualities is not a ruiner. However, the most important thing is how good is his offense, and it's really difficult to tell because 2 years ago you have a coach of the year, you have an offense that is 20th, despite the roster being unanimously decided upon as being not very good. They make the playoffs. They win a playoff game. This is all under him. And then the rest of the offense is tied to that quarterback, a quarterback that later got hurt, that was maybe a flash in a pan, and also had some other, physical, maybe mental limitations. But I don't just mean the performance. I mean the offense itself is tailored around this person, which is why the release of Daniel Jones is such a submarine torpedo, because now you have someone else running an offense that is designed around Daniel Jones' strengths. You know what I mean? And it was started right when he got here. Brian Daboll brought in Daniel Jones, asked him his input on plays he likes to run, things he was comfortable to run, and an offense was sort of built around that. Mike Kafka was interviewed. How is this like the Chiefs' offense? And he said, it's not. This is the Giants' offense. This is for this team.
And to be fair, there's nothing. These are good things.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to insert square peg into round hole. You want to make round hole.
Yeah,
for round peg.
What I'm really bringing up is one of the quantifiable good traits for Brian Daboll, which I think is that he is very good at game planning around the players that he has available to him. I think that much I think we can say is good about him. I think as a play caller, he's pretty good, but everything is so hard to gauge with on the field because the offense is based around one solitary player that really isn't that good. And I'm not trying to say replacing the quarterback fixes everything. That's not what I'm trying to say. But
hasn't
so
played 15 games in the last 2 years. Also,
100%.
Remember, we've had Tyrod Taylor. We've had
Tommy DeVito, Drew Lock,
Tommy
Tim
DeVito.
Boyle.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that it makes it very hard to come up with a critical evaluation of Brian Daboll in critical areas. So again, this falls into the take it or leave it spot for me. I would have been okay with releasing him. I'm okay with him staying. Joe Schoen, I think, requires a little bit more. I think people will consider probably mental gymnastics. To me, I think it's just being realistic. And I think I got some evidence in my corner today with an answer from John Mara today. Mm-hmm. When he tried to justify to reporters in his press conference why Joe Schoen was staying, he evidenced the process, his ability to surround himself with people in the front office that he agrees with, thinks are smart people. He said the information that we have available is like nothing I've ever seen. And this goes back to my year one point. Why was Joe Schoen's year one draft so garbage? And the answer is he came in halfway through the middle of it and he upgraded an archaic, prehistoric draft process into the 21st century. And I honestly think that he had a complete mulligan for that draft. If he sold John Mara on reinventing what this organization was doing behind closed doors. Told him, you are running a prehistoric organization. This is why you're losing. It doesn't matter if you sign me or you sign this guy or that guy or that guy. If you keep running things with a binder and an old man, you're never going to compete with the rest of the league. And I think that first year, I've been saying this for a long time now, you need to give him just a little bit of, credit that he did a lot of that draft completely on his own.
Can I play devil's advocate for a second?
Yeah, of course.
If I show a caveman, a Commodore 64 computer, and that caveman says, wow, I have never seen a computer before. This is fantastic. That doesn't mean that we have, state-of-the-art equipment.
Doesn't matter. That's irrelevant to my point, though.
Yeah, but my thing is, just because he's excited with, I have never seen anything like what we have now, does that mean is that still good enough for what we need to be competing with the rest of the league?
That's fair, but still irrelevant to my point, though.
Okay, that's my point, though.
Yeah, no, I get it, and that's totally fair. I think the statement is more of an indictment of how far the organization had already fallen than it is on how great Joe Schoen is.
Completely agree.
But
yes.
My point is that first draft needs to have an asterisk next to it for that reason. We are there. You know what I mean?
I've been on board with you saying that all along, and I completely agree.
Yeah, but I think we got some of that insight from John Mara today. I think that's him admitting that. Like, look, we were in a bad way, and he showed up halfway through the process, still halfway doing it the wrong way. We're still getting TVs brought in and installed while the draft process is going on. I think that's an asterisk right there. And right there, that takes away a lot of people's criticisms. Evan Neal, Kayvon Thibodeau, you know what I mean? Josh Azudu. A lot of those criticisms, when people bring up how bad of a GM he is, the first thing you hear is the Daniel Jones contract, which, we've discussed this at length, and I'm not going to go into this shit again, but you're kind of put in a corner. They did prioritize Barkley more before Jones. That didn't work out. They had to make a decision. I'm positive ownership signed off on the Daniel Jones thing. They had a 2-year out written into it. I'm sure they had assurances beyond that 2-year out. So this all seemed like a safe decision for Joe Schoen, although not the best decision or even a very good one, but one that probably at that juncture sort of just needed to happen. And I don't think anyone is going to defend Joe Schoen and say that he's been perfect or even great at his job.
I'm still waiting for somebody, I'm not asking you to do it. I'm asking for somebody to come up with some sort of metric to compare GMs with other GMs, hit rates of draft picks, hit rates of free agents, hit rates on trades, because it's very easy to cherry pick. Evan Neal is a bust. You can make the highlight ones, the big ticket ones, and say bust. But is his bust rate a good bust rate or bad bust rate? I compare it to everybody else. I don't know, and I don't understand why nobody does that. Because
it takes too much thinking. I mean, you're not wrong, but I mean, like, every scenario is different. This leads me into like another point about GMs making decisions to save their jobs. Like, are Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll now going to make Brett Favre-ass shoot from the hip decisions to save their own job, Hail Mary shit, just because, now they're on the hot seat, this is their last chance because John Mara said this and whatever. And we'll get to all that in a second. But that's a factor. I mean, like, GMs also get cycled so much. Who was the head coach? What were they doing? You know what I mean? Like, sometimes head coaches are like, this is the guy that I need for my offense. At what point does the head coach get the blame for that bust? You know what I mean? There's so many variables.
The position coach. I mean, go back to Evan Neal. I mean, Evan Neal, look at every single draft board from everybody had Evan Neal roughly drafted around the same spot where Joe Schoen actually picked him. Mm-hmm. We all said, why doesn't this team invest more in the offensive line? The best offensive lineman from the best conference in the country. You picked him, there's so many other factors once you pick him. Is a guy just all of a sudden he gets signed, he gets lazy? Does the position coach do a bad job with him? Does the head coach do a bad job offensive? All these different factors. Is his girlfriend a pain in the balls or something?
Is he able to handle pressure?
Is he able to handle pressure? I mean, you can run through a battery of tests during the combine, but until bullets are actually flying. You just don't know. So
And I have yet to see the report that Evan Neal had a high bust rate. You know what I mean? I haven't seen that. I mean, you might have preferred Ike Aquino, you might have preferred Charles Cross, and that's all fine, and you can hang your hat on that. But until you were like, I think Evan Neal's going to bust out, and you can show me where you said that, that
show
year.
me show me any draft board that had him in the third round
Yeah.
or the fifth round.
Go
Show me
ahead.
one.
Go ahead and pat yourself on the back. You probably deserve an NFL job because you saw it, and
Yeah,
I don't think anybody else did. So it's
yeah,
fine. I'm not
yeah.
arguing with you, but
Good
I
work.
think that a lot of I've made this point about Joe Shane already. They over evaluated where they were at the end of 2022. They made decisions based on that evaluation in 2023, and that was, in my opinion, the 2023 offseason was Joe Shane's worst. That the returns were bad. I'm not sure a single good move that was sustainable happened that year. Um, just
You're talking after the 2022 season, right?
correct into the
Okay,
2023
gotcha.
offseason. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay.
And then he acknowledged today that there were a lot of things that he looked back on. There's things that weigh on his mind, decisions he made, and that he acknowledged that he's learning. He's still learning. This is a first year GM, which is one of the fears I had about him coming in. This is a first year GM with no experience at all. He's an assistant in Buffalo, where I'm not sure that the GMing has been stellar. It's been
I
good.
I watched my dad drive for 15 years. I sat in
Mhm.
the passenger seat, watched him with the steering wheel. I watched him with the gas and the pedal. But that
Until
very
you
first
do
time
it.
I drove, that was all different. So
Yeah. So I think that Joe Shane had a very good offseason this year. It's something that John Mara referenced. I've already said that I think their biggest falter was not being able to bring in Russell Wilson to make something more of this year. But I mean, it's also, that might be my biggest complaint, but it's not like an 8 out of 10. We're not talking about Richter scale level shit here. It's just something I would have done differently and I think was a misevaluation. And that's okay because,
yeah,
first of all, I'm not a GM, so maybe you shouldn't be listening to me.
I you know I think the fact that they spent $40 million a year on Daniel Jones gave him this self confidence that he is our guy,
Mm-hmm.
and let's maybe overlooking some of the medical reports coming out after the injuries and not believing what you're seeing with arm strength or things in training camp, but he's our guy. So that's why you don't, if you have your guy, what's the point of bringing in somebody to compete with your guy? And that's what goes back to what I said earlier, where I think their biggest mistake was a little bit of blind faith that he was completely healthy and exactly the quarterback he was in the Minnesota playoff game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, Ultimately, I think I agree with Mara. I think that the process and decision making from Joe Shane, specifically in this last offseason, was in the direction that I agree with. I don't think there's a single GM out there that I think hits a home run every single move. So, whatever. But I get it, at least. Um, Now, let me hit you with this.
Mm-hmm.
Now that they have been brought back, do you think that there is a fear for you that Joe Shane or Brian Daboll will make decisions that will be, in the short term, the best thing to make a playoff push to save their jobs? Or will they make the best decisions for the long term of the franchise? Historically speaking, I believe when John Mara made public statements about Jerry Reese, it was, the 2015 offseason where he spent hundreds of $1 million on the defensive side of the ball with Snacks Harrison and Olivier Vernon and Janoris Jenkins. And then I think in 2019 when something was said about Gettleman and Judge is when they went out and they got like Adoree Jackson and Leonard Williams, and although I think they already had Leonard Williams, Adoree Jackson, they paid Leonard Williams and they got Kenny Galladay. Are you afraid of something similar happening now where in the short term it's like these are great players, but in the long term it's probably going to fuck them over?
No, and let me explain why. This is actually where we benefit from having a veteran owner, where he's been through this before with several different coaches and general managers. I think as part of the discussions of are you guys coming back or not, Mara is going to have a little more oversight in some of these decisions that are made. And I think he's going to be more of the, is this in our best interest of this move, yes or no? Because, again, if these guys are on a hot seat and they're gone in a year or two, Mara's not going anywhere. And we could say all we want about whether he's a good owner or a bad owner. He's the most invested in this team. And he's been around long enough to know, as long as he, again, go back to the word process, he has learned and understands what it is going to take to get this team back for sustainable success. And he has seen the results of quick fixes on this team. We've done it several times in the last 15 years. He knows what that looks like. If he's learned from that, he should be able to spot this move might give us an extra win or two this year, but that's not going to help us long term. It's going to put us into cap hell. It's going to do this. We don't need this. So I think as part of that discussion, are you guys coming or saying, I think he said, I'm going to have a little bit more of a final say on some of these decisions to make sure we're not doing that. So maybe a little blind faith on my part on Mara, but I don't worry about that as much as it potentially appears that could happen.
That's a very hopeful look.
It's very hopeful.
Even though it sounds scary when you say that Mara will be more involved in the decisions, your explanation is what I think probably needs to happen, right? Like, I'm here forever. I need to make sure that you guys are making decisions that are in the best interest of the team, not in the best interest of 2025.
Now here's the thing, Grump. If Mara makes bad decisions, that's a different problem altogether than is this general manager and this head coach making short-term decisions to save their ass. If Mara agrees to it and says, yeah, I think that's right, and they're bad decisions, those two are going to be fired anyway, but we have a bigger problem. So this is really the final test on Mara to see, is this guy really an owner that I can trust any longer? I have my concerns.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is going to kind of validate, is this these guys are making these short-term decisions, or is this friggin' buffoon just, rubber stamping these decisions and doesn't have the right football, IQ or football sixth sense to know this is right, this is wrong.
So
it's going to have to play out.
Yeah, where I'm hopeful with you. I do have this fear. I am still fearing this until I see otherwise, because everything is lip service right now, right? I don't believe in what's said at press conferences, because 99% of these guys, whether they're the athletes themselves, the coaches, the front office guys, or the ownership, they are veterans at answering questions, and they have veterans coaching them on how to answer questions, and they're very prepared for the questions that are coming. So that's why I don't really pay attention to a lot of press conference stuff. I pay attention more to actions. But right now, the lip service is that John Mara did not give them a playoff mandate. He just said that it has to look a hell of a lot better. There's not a lot that's worse than a 3-win season.
Well, there you go. That's Stop
number
right there.
Well, hang on. There's one more incredibly important bullet point. In Joe Schoen's press conference, he outright said, I am not making Hail Mary decisions. That's bullet point number 2. It sounds to me like they had a productive meeting. I am hopeful that they stay on board with that. I don't know how Joe Schoen feels when he goes home to his wife and kids about the security of his job, but at least at the podium and in conjunction with John Mara, they just need to improve. And God damn it, I mean that is a very minimal requirement for a GM at this point, is to improve on what we've seen.
Yeah, well, we always say that players are still, putting tape out there for their next job, whether it's not with the Giants, somewhere else. So are GMs.
True.
And if you see just blatant Hail Mary decisions that are made to mortgage the future to try to win now, believe me, small community, the NFL. And they'd be like, thinking of hiring this guy. Well, fuck him. Look what he did. He self-sabotaged his team for his own, survival. I don't want that guy on my team. So it's not as, it's not like this is the only job these guys are ever going to get, and that's it. They have a longer view too as well, and they know the history of these guys. They get other jobs. They may have to work their way back up to his positions. So it's not as sinister as we all might think it might be.
I think also, sorry, excuse me. I think also John Mara's quote about needing to see improvement has already been stretched into almost a misquote at this point, where you have dialed in people like Mike Garafolo, that I absolutely love. I think is an excellent reporter, and I was sad when he left the Giants to be a national reporter. But here he is saying that, I've seen this story before. What this means is that they have to be a playoff contender. Let's consider how much it really needs to. Now, that's fine. That's a fine statement to say. But where then that further gets extrapolated is people saying that they have to be playoffs or bust. And that's not at all what he said. To be a playoff contender, they needed like 6 more wins.
Yeah.
I mean, to be a playoff contender in today's NFL, that means you just have to be in the hunt by late December. Not even this past week, but last week. As long as you're not fully eliminated, you know what I mean? Like, that's all that we're really talking about here. We're talking about a 7, 8, 9 win team.
Again, I'm going to go back into the gotcha moment of they need to be 6 or 7 wins better. But remember, that 6 or 7 game they're starting from is an artificially low number. Do we really think that this team, if they play Daniel Jones for the rest of the year, was really truly a 3-win team? Just
Did you?
Daniel Jones. I thought they were a 4 to 5, but
okay.
but
no.
So let's say they were 5. Let's say they were 5 to 6, and all the other associated guys going on IR that maybe didn't need to go on IR. So I think saying they need to jump from 3 to 9, but it's like, well, if you really believe they're a 3-win team because all they were good for was 3 wins. So that's where it gets murky again. And
yeah,
that's
mean, truthfully, this is probably, if they had all their, eggs in the basket of winning, they're probably like a 5-win team this year, right? Not even including this game that they, lost by a score and still had a shot.
And if they had, just for some weird coincidence, they have a kicker, they beat Washington. So there's another, could have been, and that's during the Daniel Jones period, and then who knows from there. So, yeah.
And again, what I really think that this is saying, is it just has to fucking look better. There has to be some hope going forward that the guys that have been brought in the last 2 years now, this upcoming draft and free agency cycle and the 2024 one, in addition to, all the other things, but specifically those back-to-back years of strong off seasons, you have to be leaving with a sense of hope. Now,
wins are hope.
We are, famously, good friends with the Talking Giants guys, but saw the opinion that they can't have a Drake May like season. If Drake May is on this team next year, I think that almost that alone is like enough hope to retain guys for another year, based on John Mara's own thing, not my opinion, but based on his own mandate of it looking
wasn't
better.
Good enough for it wasn't good enough for the Patriots because they whacked their coach. But
yeah, but I also think that they were.
That was a bad hire.
I think that they were stronger in their conviction of Drake May than they were in Gerard Mayo right from the get-go.
I think so. I think when somebody's a mistake is a hire, and I think they did the right thing. You cut bait when you know it's a mistake.
Right.
I don't think anybody thinks that Daboll was a mistake, or even Joe Schoen was a mistake.
But perhaps just a failure.
Just a failure. We're not successful at their jobs.
Yeah. So, I saw the sentiment that, first of all, people are outraged that they are being retained. I guess, I'll let you respond to that sort of thing in a second, but I guess I have 2 minor things here. Number one is, I don't think that this decision was super egregious that it's worthy of outrage, personally. I think that maybe that's Giants fans only paying attention to the Giants and not the rest of the NFL over the last, 30 years. There's tons of examples of bad ownership, bad GMing, etc. I also think that there was one other thing. Damn. Being outraged over this decision. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's that serious.
I don't think if you drop in Bill Belichick or Jesus Christ as coach of this team is winning 11 or 12 games. I think that's part of it too. um, well, to get back to the outrage part, for every Giant fan who really looks under the hood and reads all the websites, listens to all the podcasts, gets more analysis than the pregame show on Sunday at 1:00 or listens to the Fan. For every one of those people, there are 1,000 people who only get their information from the pregame show, and all they care about, win or lose.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line, don't care about process, don't care about the draft, don't care about Senior Bowl, don't care about the cost of tea in China. I want to be entertained on Sunday. They lose.
Mm-hmm.
They lose. They lose. They lose. I can name 4 players on the team. They lose. Those are the ones that are like, I'm tired of wasting my Sundays. More than, I think, us as fans that really live, breathe this shit 12 months a year.
Yeah. So, the other thing I was going to say is, it's the same contingent that says, firing people every 3 years is not a recipe for success. So you complain if they fire them every 3 years. You complain if you keep them. You just want to see wins. And I understand that, and I get it, but maybe the higher level decisions aren't for you.
When you go through the list of all the coaches the Patriots hired and fired before they hired Bill Belichick,
for real.
The Ron Mayers, all of those guys, the Pete Carrolls was on that list. They just kept hiring and firing. Then you hit the guy. No, you get a guy who lasts 20 years and wins 7 rings. That's pretty extreme, but
But I mean, that kind of shit is so rare. That's what everyone references Mike Tomlin, and it's just like, do you know why that's amazing? Because it hasn't happened like anywhere else. Nobody has been around.
They've had 3 coaches in my lifetime, and I am 52.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
It's not like one of them was there for 45 years.
You can aspire to be that, and you should, but that can't be the expectation. Mm-hmm. At least it can't be the expectation now.
I want to, we were talking about the press conferences. I want to throw this in too. Okay. I want to give a fart to the reporters.
Okay.
In this press conference. They smell blood in the water, and they know that Mara is a very quotable, memeable guy who says things that you can rewind and play and make fun of him forever. And I really felt the questions that were asked in the limited time they had to talk to him were just trying to get that gotcha quote out of him. Keep referencing, well, the record is this, the record is this, the record is this. We are hack podcasters. This is not our full-time gig. We're fans who do this, as a hobby. If we know that a major component of that was the tank, which led to a good portion of why the record is, not one of those people asking the questions had like the asterisk with the record. It was just like the bottom line, 3-14. The record went from this to 3-14. It was just like, if you're going to ask stupid questions, you're going to kind of get generic, stupid answers. I mean, I'm all for reporters grilling players and coaches. It's their job. They should be doing that. But to kind of lead them into you're hoping they say something silly, that's just a very, very poor job. And I think that whole pool that was out there, I'm not going to say any names, but the voices. Just a really, really bad job at doing your job.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback off of that in the smelling blood in the water thing, right? Part of this is incentive to get engagement. And I don't mean that in a directly nefarious way. I just mean, forget the Twitter or the internet term engagement, just the actual word engagement. It is easy to be disengaged as a Giants fan, right? Like, it's easy to be fucking mentally checked out for the last 6 months at this point. That's totally. If you were checked out after week 1 against the Vikings, I don't blame you.
Think about it now. I mean,
but that being said, how do you as a journalist get people to talk about a team that no one even feels like listening about, and that is to kind of be a little hacky? You know what I mean? And just look for, certain press that's going to get something. And right now, all that is negative press. And I saw an article, and again, I'll do the same thing and not name names, but there was a reference to Tom Coughlin having to defend his job in his 4th year and how far we've fallen from that standard. Isn't it possible that that standard was wrong the first time, not the second time? Tom Coughlin proved to me over the years that they fucked up long ago and should have kept Tom Coughlin all along, should have replaced Jerry Reese with a GM that was willing to work with the quarterback you knew worked, the offensive coordinator you knew worked, the head coach you knew worked. But the GM was getting players the head coach wouldn't even play. Jarrell Jernigan playing in like meaningless games in a lost season and shit like that. That actually was the mistake, forcing Tom Coughlin to have to defend his job as opposed to the boys club in the front office. That's been a family ties thing up until Joe Schoen got here. So if anything, John Mara is correcting an age-old mistake, probably his biggest mistake in his career, was putting things on Tom Coughlin that should have been on Jerry Reese and Mark Ross to begin with. So I think that has the complete causality flipped. Causality is not the right word, but
it sounds good.
Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you to some point. I thought that was. I thought that John Mara's answers were about as good as they could be, considering the season that he had to defend and the decision he had to defend. I thought the questions were bad.
Yeah,
he made it easy on him.
The answers were as good also as what he could say. I mean, the big matzo ball in the soup here this year was the tank. And again, you can't talk about the tank. So you have to dance around it. He didn't even do a wink towards it, but he answered as best as he could without saying it. And I'm not here to defend Mara. I think you've heard me rail about him all year.
For real, both of us, yeah.
For both of us, for real. I just think that, reporters' job and the media's job is to get the facts and get information, to shine light on what's going on so you can educate the world, whether it's your readers or just everything. And I just, like everything else, the beat writers on this team have kind of failed at doing that. They've given up on trying to uncover what's really going on, but pushing their agendas, their narratives, their brands. And it's sad. And that's why I respect so much of the independent people that cover this team, and those people I will say by name: Talking Giants, all of the podcasts that are out there that are doing great work, Entertainer, Pat Traina, all of them, they're not beholden to them. They're not worried about access. They're not worried about, their brands. They're worried about finding out what the story is. And to them, I say, just keep up the good fight.
I think that's probably going to do it for this one. I'm sure a nugget or two will come out over the coming week, but I think this is going to be a generally pretty boring week in Giants world.
Yeah.
So we'll be back next Tuesday morning for you guys with a playoff weekend recap.
You're not going to let me bitch about the Knicks?
Oh, no. Not after 53 minutes, no.
For those of you on our text chain, you know where to find me. We can bitch all night about that. I love all you guys.
Yeah. So we will see you all on Tuesday morning after a playoff weekend, after you and I go to a hockey game, and after...
Ooh! Lightning Devils this Saturday. Anybody in Newark who wants to meet up with us before the game, well, I'll be the one in the Braden Point jersey,
Yeah.
and that
Getting
loser will
hot
be in
dogs
some.
thrown at him. Could happen. Not from me, but
For sure.
And I think that like something worth talking about in Giants Land will definitely come out in the next week.
Oh,
But I don't
I'm
think
sure
it's gonna
something will.
be I don't think it's gonna be a waterfall of shit, do you?
I don't think so. I think this was it. This was the story.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing really that can happen right now unless.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Unless he
can't cut
changes his
anybody now.
mind.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. With that being said, we will see you guys next Tuesday on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and of course YouTube. Until then, go Giants.
Go Giants.